Okay, picture this. Ancient North America. But not like we know it now. Think. Way back. A world just teeming with these colossal creatures. I mean, a genuine lost world.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine, right?
Totally. We're talking about those huge, shaggy mammoths, the massive curving tusks, and saber-toothed cats. Those fangs were just, wow.
Designed for the kill,
And
definitely.
giant sloths, like these enormous, slow-moving, almost bear-like things living in trees. Even beavers, but get this, the size of actual bears.
Bear-sized beaver. That's
Quite an image. It was this incredible ecosystem, right? All these magnificent giant animals, megafauna thriving for ages.
Exactly. For millennia. But then something happens. A real mystery unfolds because within a, well, shockingly short time, evolutionarily speaking, maybe a few thousand years,
Yeah.
roughly 70%. 70% of North America's megafauna just vanished, gone.
Wow, 70%. That's huge.
Yeah, and it wasn't just there. You see these same really dramatic patterns of disappearance pop up in other places too. Australia, Madagascar, New Zealand. Right.
Similar stories across the globe.
So our deep dive today, it's really tackling this central, pretty profound question. How did our species, we don't have the claws, the sharp teeth, the sheer power of these beasts. How did we become the most efficient predator on the planet? Efficient enough to cause these massive extinction events? And maybe more importantly, what does this incredible, maybe slightly unsettling chapter tell us about what it even means to be human?
That's a fantastic setup. And our mission today is exactly that. We're going to explore some really fascinating sources that wrestle with these very questions.
Okay.
We'll look at some early anthropological theories that try to explain why humans were so different. And then we'll trace how new archaeological methods, really revolutionary stuff, came along and just completely challenged, even rewrote those old ideas about our origin.
It's like flipping the script.
Exactly. We'll dig into whether humanity's defining trait was, violence and aggression, like some theories suggested, or if maybe your story is much more nuanced, maybe more about ingenuity, adaptability. Interesting.
Yeah, the goal is really to give you a clearer, more informed picture of our evolutionary past, moving beyond some of the popular myths.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. The sheer scale of this megafauna extinction. It's kind of staggering when you think about it.
It really is.
The sources, they paint this vivid picture. These ecosystems, once just bustling with life, with those incredible creatures, eventually just reduced to bone fields, vast landscapes of bones.
Yeah, the emptiness left behind. It's almost haunting to consider. Losing such dominant species across whole continents.
So what do the sources say caused it? Because that seems to be the crux.
Well, the overwhelming evidence points pretty strongly in one direction. The arrival of humans.
Us.
Us. Our species, moving into these new landscapes, apparently hunted with an efficiency that the native species they hadn't evolved any defenses against it.
Right, they wouldn't have seen anything like us before.
Exactly. We're talking about that 70% number in North America vanishing within just a few millennia after humans showed up. I mean, put that in perspective. That's like losing almost 3/4 of all the big land animals alive today.
Wow, in basically an evolutionary blink of an eye.
Absolutely. And like you said, we see these really similar patterns elsewhere. Australia, Madagascar, New Zealand. The timing almost always lines up closely with human arrival.
So what about climate change? Doesn't that usually get mentioned?
Oh, definitely. And climate shifts certainly played a role, no doubt. They created environmental stress, changed habitats. But the evidence suggests that human hunting was let's call it the decisive factor, the tipping point.
The final nail in the coffin, maybe.
Perhaps, yeah. It seems our ancestors, right from the start, were a real force of nature themselves, a new kind of ecological force.
That is powerful. And, yeah, a bit unsettling. That just our arrival could reshape ecosystems so drastically.
Okay.
But it brings me back to that puzzle. How? How did a species like us, without the built-in weapons, the claws, the fangs, how did we become such a dominant force? It feels like we were punching way above our weight.
It really does seem that way, doesn't it? And it's the absolute core of the mystery.
So what was the evolutionary shift?
Well, the sources suggest it wasn't about raw physical power. It was something else, something uniquely human.
Like?
Our intelligence, probably, our ability to innovate, and really crucially, our capacity for collaboration, working together.
Okay. Teamwork makes the dream work. even back then.
You could say that, yeah. We developed things like projectile weapons spears, maybe spear throwers later on. We figured out complex hunting strategies, coordinating attacks, and we got really good at processing carcasses efficiently, getting the maximum nutrition.
So these were like cultural advantages, not biological ones.
Exactly. Cultural and cognitive tools. And those proved far more deadly to unprepared megafauna than any single predator's claws or teeth. We outsmarted them, essentially.
It wasn't our muscles, it was our minds.
Yes.
And our social glue. Okay, that makes sense. But this whole question about human nature, our inherent capacity for violence versus, say, cooperation, that's where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah.
There was this specific theory that tackled this head on.
Oh, absolutely. A very influential and definitely controversial one. Back in 1953, an anthropologist named Raymond Dart came up with what became known as the killer ape hypothesis.
Killer ape. Sounds dramatic.
It was. Dart's idea was incredibly provocative. He argued that what really made humans distinct, what set us apart from other apes, wasn't just our bigger brains. It was our inherent violence, our aggression.
Seriously, he thought violence defined us.
Fundamentally, yes.
Yeah.
He painted this picture of early humans as these bloodthirsty hunters, even suggested cannibalism was common. He thought we were shaped by this deep-seated evolutionary drive for aggression and competition.
Wow.
And he got specific. He looked at fossil sites and argued that the bones, teeth, and horns found there weren't just food scraps. He claimed they were deliberately chosen and used as the first weapons.
So tools didn't start for building things, but for hitting things.
According to Dart, yes. He saw tool use evolving directly from this violent impulse. He called it a death-centered culture. The idea was we weren't just the smartest ape, we were the most naturally aggressive one.
A death-centered culture. That's
Yeah.
bleak. But you said this idea gained traction. People actually bought into this.
Oh, big time. It wasn't just academic talk. There was this science writer, Robert Ardrey, who took Dart's ideas and ran with them. He wrote these incredibly popular books like African Genesis.
I think I've heard of that one.
Probably. Ardrey basically repackaged Dart's hypothesis into these gripping, almost cinematic narratives about our violent origins, and they really resonated with people.
Why, though? Why did such a dark idea catch on?
Well, think about the timing, mid-20th century. Post-World War II, the nuclear age kicking off. People were grappling with unimaginable levels of human violence.
Ah, okay. So this theory kind of offered an explanation, like, oh, it's just in our nature.
Exactly. For many, reading about a killer ape ancestry felt disturbingly familiar. It seemed to explain humanity's capacity for war, for cruelty, made it feel less like a choice and more like this unavoidable evolutionary baggage we all carried. It just fit the anxieties of the era almost too perfectly.
It was a story that seemed to make sense of a really violent century.
Precisely. A powerful story, even if, as we'll see, it turned out to be flawed.
Right. So let's get to that. How did this popular, seemingly explanatory theory start to, well, crumble? What happened to the killer ape?
Well, despite its narrative appeal, the science eventually caught up. As archaeological methods got way more sophisticated, the killer ape hypothesis just couldn't hold water anymore.
How so? What kind of evidence came up?
A lot of it came down to re-examining Dart's original evidence. Remember those skull fractures he thought were from hominins bashing each other with bones?
Yeah.
Turns out many of those could be explained by natural processes. Think about it. Bones buried for millions of years get crushed by soil pressure, they get distorted, or other animals gnaw on them after death.
Oh, right. Like hyenas. They have incredibly powerful jaws.
Exactly. Researchers found that some of the bone damage Dart pointed to looked identical to damage caused by hyena bites, or even just the natural process of fossilization itself. It wasn't necessarily violence, it was often just time and environment doing their thing.
So this smoking gun wasn't so smoky after all.
Pretty much. The evidence just wasn't supporting this idea of innate tool-wielding aggression as our primary driver.
Wow. Okay, so that totally flips the script then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If those fractures weren't proof of killer apes, what does that mean for who our ancestors were?
It led to a major reinterpretation. Instead of seeing early hominins as these dominant, top-of-the-food-chain hunters, the pictures started shifting towards them being, well, often scavengers, or even prey themselves.
Prey. Like we were the ones getting hunted.
Sometimes, absolutely. We weren't always the biggest, baddest creatures on the landscape, so this idea of us being inherently violent hunters from day one just didn't fit the emerging picture.
Which raises that question again. If they weren't primarily these super aggressive hunters, what were they doing? How did they survive? How did they get meat, avoid becoming meat.
And this is where another anthropologist comes in, Lewis Binford, with some truly groundbreaking work. He developed an approach he called living archaeology.
Living archaeology, what's that?
Instead of just digging up old bones and trying to guess what happened, Binford thought we needed to understand the processes that actually create archaeological sites. So he did something radical.
Which was?
He went and lived with modern hunter-gatherers. Specifically, he spent a lot of time embedded with the Nunamiut Inupiat people in Alaska.
Wow.
And he meticulously studied everything they did, how they hunted, how they butchered animals, what happened at their campsites, how bones got broken, which tools left, which marks, what carnivores did to the remains. Everything. He wanted to see the patterns created by known behaviors in real time.
So he used the present to understand the past, like creating a reference library for interpreting old sites.
Exactly, a kind of Rosetta Stone, like you said. And his insights were absolutely monumental. He showed that many of the patterns archaeologists had pointed to as proof of organized hunting, well, they could actually be explained by much more mundane, everyday stuff.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so finding a big pile of animal bones at an ancient site. Previously, people might have jumped to conclusions. A major kill site. Hominins brought down a huge animal here.
Yeah, sounds logical.
But Binford showed that such a pile could just as easily be a scavenging site, where hominins dragged pieces back from a carcass killed by another predator. Or maybe it was just a processing camp, where they broke bones for marrow over time. The pattern itself didn't automatically mean big, brave hunter.
He introduced nuance, lots of nuance.
Tons of it. He showed how the specific types of cut marks on bones, and crucially, where they were on the bone, could tell you a lot. Were they skinning, cutting off meat, or just smashing the bone late in the game to get the last bits of marrow? And importantly, did human tool marks come before or after carnivore tooth marks?
The timing, that seems critical.
It was huge. Because if the carnivore marks came first, well, that points strongly towards scavenging,
Right.
picking up the leftovers.
So did they find evidence like that at actual ancient sites? Like Olduvai Gorge, that's a famous one?
Absolutely. Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania was a key location for testing these ideas. Researchers there did incredibly detailed analyses of literally hundreds of thousands of bone fragments.
And what did they find?
They looked under microscopes, identifying every little mark, and they found consistently that bones often had carnivore bite marks. You know, from hyenas, big cats underneath the human tool marks.
Underneath. So the animal chewed on it first.
Exactly. Suggesting that early hominins weren't always making the first kill. They were often clever opportunists, showing up after a predator had already eaten its fill, maybe chasing off smaller scavengers, and then using their tools to get at what was left: meat scraps, marrow, brains. High-value stuff carnivores might miss.
The ultimate scavengers, using their smarts to capitalize on what others left behind.
Precisely. Binford's work, combined with this kind of detailed site analysis, really challenged that whole man-the-hunter narrative that had been dominant for so long. It suggested our early survival often depended more on ingenuity, opportunism, and tool use for processing, rather than just being aggressive hunters.
So it wasn't man the slayer so much as maybe man the clever scavenger.
That's a good way to put it. It shifted the whole perspective.
That's just fascinating how these new methods like Binford actually live in the life, and just that willingness to question old assumptions completely changed the story.
Yeah.
From innate violence to, well, ingenious adaptability.
Yeah.
Making the best of a tough situation.
It really highlights how science progresses, doesn't it? Reevaluating evidence, developing new ways to look at things.
Definitely. So, okay, let's try and connect the dots here.
Right.
Where does this leave us? We've gone from our ancestors being these major drivers of extinction
Yeah.
through this whole killer ape phase,
Mm-hmm.
and now landed on this more nuanced picture of opportunistic scavengers, at least early on.
Right.
What's the takeaway?
It's definitely a richer, more complex picture than where we started. I think a few key themes really stand out from this deep dive.
Okay.
First, humans as extinction drivers. That seems undeniable. Whether as hunters or just incredibly efficient opportunists, our arrival reshaped ecosystems profoundly. We were a major ecological force right from the get-go. That says something about our adaptability, our impact.
Right, our efficiency had consequences.
Definitely. Second, this whole violence versus scavenging debate. It shows our early survival wasn't just about being born killers. Success often came from being smart, from exploiting niches others couldn't, like getting marrow from bones. It doesn't mean violence didn't exist, but it wasn't the only story, maybe not even the main one initially.
So smarts over aggression, perhaps?
Often, yeah. Third, we saw how evolutionary myths get challenged. The killer ape idea, as compelling as it was, seems now more like a reflection of mid-20th century anxieties than solid science, a cultural projection onto the past.
A story we told ourselves about ourselves.
Exactly. Which reminds us science is always a work in progress. And that leads to the last point. New evidence reshapes narratives. Our understanding isn't fixed. As methods improve, like Binford's work or microscopic analysis, we refine the picture. We move from Dart's killer apes to Binford's clever scavengers. That's how knowledge advances.
So putting it all together, our human story, it's not this simple linear march of hunters conquering everything. It's much messier, more intricate. A mix of violence, sure, but also incredible opportunism, ingenuity, adaptation.
Precisely, a complex interplay of all those factors.
It really challenges those simple narratives we sometimes like.
It does, and I think this deep dive shows that the real story of our origins is actually far more complex and, frankly, far more interesting than just a straightforward tale of aggression. It highlights this dynamic back and forth between our environment, our cleverness, and our capacity for both huge impact and really subtle adaptation.
We started out asking how we, without the biological weapons,
Hmm.
became such drivers of extinction. And we found that, yes, our impact was massive, but maybe the way we achieved that early success was more about being smart opportunists than just being inherently violent.
Yeah, using our brains and tools in ways no other creature could.
It really makes you think differently about what defines us, doesn't it? And maybe, for you listening, it raises a final question to chew on. How much of what we think we know about human nature is grounded purely in the scientific evidence? And how much is actually shaped by the stories we tell ourselves? Stories that maybe reflect the hopes, fears, and anxieties of our own specific time.
That's a deep one to ponder.
Definitely something to think about until our next deep dive.